Welcome back, everybody. Are we ready? Okay, so please, everybody, can we start? Okay, so our next speaker is an experienced nurse having worked in several large complex acute NHS trusts in London, possesses strong leadership and influencing skills, leading with authenticity, compassion, and commitment. Currently working as an executive level as a part of unitary board with previous experience of working in the number of large complex acute and integrated NHS trusts. Highly skilled in patient care, quality, and patient safety. Demonstrable experience in leadership, operational management, strategy, people, equity, and inclusion. Possesses a Master of Science in Advanced Practice Leadership from King's College London and E.Leaven graduate. Highly commended by Nursing Times in 2019 for work in equality, diversity, and inclusion. In 2021 and 2022, named as one of the HSJ top paying leader in health. Trustee work with Health Force, which seeks to bolster volunteering in healthcare, health and social care. So her recognized as Burdett Hero by the Burdett Trust for Nursing 2022. So, without further ado, our chief nurse, Karen Bona.
Okay, language continues to evolve. There are significant number of words, phrases, or acronyms that comes when we talk about race and ethnicity. It started with the BME way back in 1970s, which is Black Minority Ethnic, and this was used to fight the racial racism across the UK. This term was used first in Congress in the middle 80s, and it was highlighted and became vain during the height of the pandemic, wherein the disparity amongst the victims of BAME was highlighted. Now, the most recent government guidelines, as far as I'm aware, we don't use the name BAME anymore. It's the ethnic minority. But we're not here to talk about the things here, the names and acronyms. Rather, from the personal experience of our gracious leader, we're a personal journey about racism or about being an ethnic minority.
I am honored to be able to have this one-on-one interview with my boss, mentor, and not just a friend, but a very strong supporter for the KALINGA Filipino organization, who enable us to grow to greater heights. We are joined by students, nurses, and other well-meaning friends online through Facebook and YouTube Live. Please join us in this conversation with Ms. Karen Bona. Karen, it is good to see you.
Hello. Hello.
Just use one.
Hello. Wonderful. So, listen, it's always hard to hear yourself, as Akosia just said. It's like, who are they talking about? So, can I just say, it's a real privilege to be here amongst you all. I couldn't think of a better way to spend my Saturday morning. So, yeah, thank you for having me. And it's really hard to follow May and Akosia, though. I'm just saying, it's like, oh my gosh. Oh, by the way, I'm quite nervous. I have no idea what he's going to ask me. Literally no idea.
Thank you for the KALINGA organization for giving us this opportunity to ask you questions. Very impressive credentials. A degree from King's College London, and worked in several large complex organizations in London. The crucial question is, why do you do what you do?
That's such a great question. So I always wanted to do nursing from when I was a really little girl. It was just my dream. And I can't explain why, but I just knew I was always destined to be a nurse. And I was really lucky to have found my vocation very early on and got into it and loved it and found that I was good at it. And so my key ethos is caring for people, looking after people, and for me, that really matters. Kindness, compassion, and care is what drives me.
Your parents arrived in the UK post-Windrush in the late 50s and 60s from the West Indian British colonies of Jamaica and Barbados. Tell us about your childhood.
It's online now. Yes, what I say must stay in the room, but it might not, it might go. Just need to be really careful. So firstly, can I just say, actually my parents were part of the Windrush generation. They started, which spans from 1948 to 1971. So my dad came from the island of Jamaica and he arrived in the UK. They were British citizens, part of the British colony, had British passports. So I don't say they emigrated, they moved here, because technically to them, this was just an extension of their community. My mum arrived from Barbados in 1965, and she met my dad 3 months after she landed. He spotted her walking down the road. I do tell you, she said he was behind her, and I said to her, we joke about it, my dad sadly died in 2015, but I joked with her and she said, oh, I didn't see him, but she told me what he was wearing. I was like, oh, okay. So anyway, and then he used to work on the buses, so he came to the UK, he was a train mechanic, and he worked for London Transport. And he spotted her, she went into a house in northwest London where she was renting a room. We used to have to rent rooms from each other. It was quite difficult back then for black people coming to the UK. And then he knocked on that door the next day to find out who this beautiful Barbadian woman was that he saw. And the rest is history. They stayed together for 48 years. Wow. In 2015. So, my childhood was a mixture of things. I was born in London, and I lived in Aylesbury as a little girl. I lived at what is actually an estate with social housing. My parents we were all very small, and my parents moved to Aylesbury as an extension from London in order to obviously pursue their dreams. And I lived in social housing when I was a little girl, and then I moved to Luton in Bedfordshire where I did my training. I had a great childhood. I was often the only black kid in the class or the black person in my year. We were the only black family on my street. Racism was quite rough when I was young, so it was an interesting time for me and my family growing up in the UK back then. But what I have to say is I was very tenacious, and I was very sociable, and I always got on with lots of people. And so I really thank my parents. I have a brother and 2 sisters, and my parents inspired me and continue to inspire me every single day.
Chief Nurse at Ducks Healthcare, Workforce, Race, Equality, Health Force, and Racism Wisdom, Prostate Cancer UK volunteer, a passionate and proud nurse. Of all these many hats, which one do you love the most?
Oh my gosh. Question. So, can I say, I love them all.
You love them all.
I do. And the reason I love them all is one, because I love being your chief nurse. I love it. I'm inspired by all of you every single day. And those of you know, I meet with many of the senior nurses at 8:30 every single morning. Michael, Jose will know, often on the calls, there'll be colleagues in the room on those calls. And honestly, it's the best part of my day. Wow. It sets me up for the day, and just being here with you all, doing all of this stuff, just honestly, I'm truly inspired by all of you. And I love everything else that I do. So I'm always really clear that I only do things that I really enjoy, especially when it comes to volunteering. I'm passionate about Prostate Cancer UK. My dad died of prostate cancer. So I'm a real champion. I work very closely with them. I promised myself after my dad's death that I would do that. It's a legacy. The Workforce Race Equality Standards Advisory stuff was because I'm passionate about inclusion. Kozia and I, when I started this job, Kozia was the chief nurse in her provider trust at the time, and I was still only number 10 in the country for black and brown chief nurses that get to executive positions, and that number has not changed massively, kind of bobs around that. So you know, for me, I'm really, really proud to be here. I'm proud, and everything else that I do is all because of passion and legacy, because what's important is that we're here and we pull people through and we support people and we motivate people in order, because I'll retire and I want to see many more of you in this room being chief nurses. May, oh my God, she's not a chief nurse in waiting.
I know.
Oh my God. You know, I've got Jose on my team, Mitchell, you've got an amazing community of people. So I love everything that I do. I cannot choose one hat. If they fit on my afro, I will.
So if there is, being belong to an ethnic minority, what are the disadvantage or advantage of the struggle in climbing up before you reach this stage in your life? And could you please tell us any struggle or specific, challenges that has got something to do with being belong to ethnic minority on your progression to your current position?
God, they're not making it easier. So can I just firstly say, you also introduced the fact that there's a movement to change the terminology. And the Race and Health Observatory did a great straw poll about a year ago, and it was really inconclusive because there were so many different ways we could all talk about ourselves as people of difference. Yeah. So firstly, I don't like the word minorities. And we are moving, and we were at the CNO, Chief Nursing Officer for England, Ruth May's conference a few weeks ago now, Kozia, and we talked about the word global majority. Because actually in the whole of the world, black and brown, particularly brown people, are the majority. And minority by that terminology can infer you're less than and not as good as. And everybody in this room and beyond is as good as anybody else. So global majority, we've just called ourselves that as all the chief nurses and providing nurses, haven't we? We've changed our WhatsApp group. We've changed, but we are the global majority. Thank you. So there have been struggles. I'm not going to pretend. Racism is real. It lives in our society, in the fabric of the society, in the DNA of organisations, unfortunately. And it's all incumbent on everybody, whether they look like you, me, Kozia, Jose, Michael, to really change and shift the dial on that. So don't forget our allies. There are many of them. I have many allies. White allies, that people that you do not expect that will support and champion you. When May mentioned, look for those people, remember as well, they're not always the obvious people. So do remember that. I think that's really, really important. So I have had struggles, I've had bullying, I've been bullied. I talk about it very openly. It really demoralised me, actually, and I spent about 3-4 years really recovering from that. I took a downgrade, I took a downgrade to recover, to get myself back on track. So, but I have to say that through all the struggles, it's just created more strength. And it's driven me more to really, really champion fairness and inclusion, because I've experienced it at its worst. And therefore it's really, really important for me to be a compassionate and inclusive leader. I don't always get it right, trust me, because Jose will tell me if I don't get it right, or Mitchell. I'm not perfect, we make mistakes, we don't always land well, but every time. But you go into things with intention to be kind, compassionate and inclusive, and that's why it's really, really important to me.
I think to make a follow-up on the next question. But when you're facing such seemingly hopeless situation, Karen, where does hope come from for you? Oh my gosh.
So that's a great question.
It's called the hot seat.
Oh my God, it's getting even hotter. Where does hope come from? So my family, my mum and dad, always, as I grew up as a little girl, always taught me I could be anything I want to be if I work hard enough. And I heard the word luck used by man. Can I just say, luck is, you create luck. It's hard work meets opportunity. Remember that. So for me, I think hope comes from family, from people that will lift you up. May mentioned it as well in her talk. The people that matter to you, hold them close to you. The people that really, so Cody and I were talking about our group, they hold me up. So we've got a group that are for black and brown chief nurses and providing nurses. They hold me up every day. And all of you hold me up, give me hope. So there's always hope in every situation. And when I had that really difficult time, the reason I took a downgrade and went back to an organisation is because I was nurtured there. Okay. And what I realised is you have to have a sense of belonging. It's so important, and I do not choose and move anywhere unless I feel I can have a sense of belonging. It's not about the banding, it's not about the title, it's not about that, it's about, do I belong here? Can this be somewhere where I get a sense of belonging? And I remember a colleague of mine saying, how do you create a culture that houses the human spirit? And it's really important for us to remember, and it's mentioned a bit already this morning, the sense of belonging is really, really important. And look at all of you here, the sense of belonging in your community. And I feel like I'm part of your community.
You are! You are! We got a question from the audience, Greg? Sorry for the technicalities, it's just that. Yes? Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Glo, Ward Sister in St. Patrick Ward. Karen, thank you for coming. Just a simple question. Where do you spend your well-being day? And how do you spend it?
No pressure. Simple, didn't it? I just thought that was a prerequisite. So I talk a lot about, when I write my little blogs every couple of weeks,
yes.
Yeah, we read them, and I talked about during the pandemic, I ran a lot. And I did loads of wellbeing, I cycle loads. I spend a lot of my time also thinking about my own personal mental health. Yeah. Because it mentioned earlier, we are all impacted during this really, really difficult time. And I think the other thing is, I think people like May are really inspiring because she's found a way to stand in this change and still succeed. And I think we've got to accept as well, there's always going to be change now.
Yes.
We get over ourselves to think, when's this going to end? It's not going to end. There will always be change and flux. How do you find your position and stand in that? So I went away recently because I think I was blogging that. I got a little tan. I went to Barbados. It was very nice. I was lying on the beach. I did not think about anything else, and I meditated a lot. So I spent my time, and answer your question, at well-being, thinking about my mental and physical health, and spending time with people I love. And the things that I love doing, and when I leave here later, I'll be doing some other stuff that I love, and tomorrow. So I think it's really important, and I say this a lot, I think you guys that work with me will hear me say it a lot. Your time is really important and precious. And whilst we love our jobs, we should love ourselves and think about our well-being as part of that. You'll only be good at your job if you think about yourself and what makes you tick, what builds up. There's a guy called John Amici, if you're ever reading his books, please do, or look at his blogs, he talks about you've got to fill your cup.
Yes.
And I've got to say, my cup is pretty full this morning. Thank you.
A recent poll survey by YouGov of 1,200 ethnic minority, Britons found the majority, which is 84%, believed racism existed in the United Kingdom. It found 38% of ethnic minority people had experienced racism in the workplace, and 44% had experienced an impact on their career. Your thoughts about this?
It's absolutely right. I mean, I've said it already.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and deny that racism doesn't exist. I think it would be wrong to say that. You can only change something if you can say it out loud. And we're too sometimes afraid to say and call it out. You can't fix something you can't see. And so even the word microaggression is a nice term to use, but they're acts of racism. So I think I agree with everything. I've experienced it myself. But what we all here have to do, and people like Cozy, AI, Jose, Michael, all of us, is we have to break down some of those barriers. And one of the things about in organisations, we talk about this stuff a lot, but this is a societal issue. And so with that comes, and many of you, I know, unfortunately, some of those areas that you mentioned have had some patients that are also not very kind to many of you from many backgrounds. So we have to just keep working very hard to ensure that you see more of us and we be part of the conversations and part of the change. And so I think it's really important when May talks about putting your voice in rooms and speaking and being heard is really, really important. So I absolutely agree with all those findings. It's unfortunate, but the realism is that that does really happen and we can all be part of the change if we go forward.
All right. Greg, do we have one question from our audience? Jenny, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, it's Echo. I'm Jenny Kagiwa. I have a dual role at the moment as an NHS nurse advisor at NHS England and also head of global at Florence Nightingale Foundation. You'll hear me talk later. But I wanted to ask Karen, you've worked with more of us now. And what would be your advice in relation to, because you know more of our culture now and what needs to change? Because having come to this point in my career and going into a senior role, there are things that we need to overcome. But how would you, from your perspective, what's your advice for budding Filipino leaders?
Thank you. And can you give Jen a clap? Because she's another awesome Filipino leader in the NHS. We hung out a few weeks ago, didn't we, Jen? We hung out a few weeks ago, so she's awesome. So thank you for that question. So, I mean, my advice, I think, would be to know your worth, dream. Some of the stuff May said, dream, and actually challenge yourselves, because I said to all of you, your aspirations are high, but you've got to reach them. And the other thing I've also mentioned is find your allies. So you've got your tribe, these are your people here, but also beyond that, you'll have your allies. You'll have people that will champion and support. You need to seek them out. And you need to also think about the things that you also need from them. And remember, it's not always about you doing something different. The organisations need to change to support you. And that's why the likes of us in these positions have to help you as well, because there's no point in you going off and doing things and changing yourselves and coming back and everything's still the same. That isn't going to make a difference. So that there is a lot of work going on to change cultures and organisations. You have to create the right culture. So I say to all of you, dream big, find your tribe, find your allies, and actually just keep going, as May said earlier, because you will get there. You will get there. And remember, it isn't always about moving up. Sometimes it's about just being the best you can be in the job that you've chosen.
Doing it.
Exactly. Just be the best you can be. And that's all I ever wanted. I didn't want to be a chief nurse. I didn't see many people look like me, to be fair. But if you don't see yourself, that's one thing. So it's good that you've got colleagues in the room now, you can see yourself. You can see people that look like you. But I didn't want to be, I didn't go into nursing to be a chief nurse. I went into nursing to be the best I could be, to give the best care. And that's, I think, important. And stay with your values. Do not compromise them. If you feel you're in any space where you're compromising, you are not in the right place.
Follow-up question, Karen. I'm going to go specific now with our trust partners here. At present, as far as I'm aware, there's hardly any Band 8 in above, apart from the two new deputies which arrived only because when you started. What are the trust undertakings or initiatives to encourage more? I'm not just talking about Filipinos in particular, but to have more ethnic minority going above that rank. Like what I said, we mentioned earlier, people tend to be satisfied from where they are, band 7, band 6, but we have to encourage more. What are your programs in regards to this?
So I think firstly, welcome to, we've got Jose, who's an Associate Chief Nurse, and you've got Mitchell. Mitchell, he's on the call, so hopefully he'll come and see you guys later. He's the only Deputy Chief Nurse with Filipino background in the country. Is that acceptable? No. But we're on a journey. I mean, my people have been here since the inception of the NHS. Windrush generation came to build the NHS. And we're still only 10, 12, 15. And there's a journey for us all to go on. So what I would say is that what we're doing as an organisation, one, I've got to really give props to Neil MacDonald, who you'll see later, who's your chief exec. He is an ally, he is a champion. He recruited me. Yeah? So I think you've got to, he wants to make a difference. We have one of the most diverse boards in the country. I'm talking about the executive board in the country. You just need to look at the workforce race equality standards that tell you that. So again, great ally. And he is very much, and along with all of us, championing, you'll hear from Bridget later, diversity and inclusion in all its senses in the organisation. We recognise there's work for us to do. I'm not going to sit here and say that there isn't stuff for us to do. The staff survey tells us that. Since I've been in post, and it goes back to the point I made earlier, is if you don't see yourself, but just by seeing, and I know Kozia, by seeing someone like a Kozia doing her job, or Jackie Dunkley-Bent, the Chief Midwifery Officer for the country, it inspires people. We've got more diversity at senior nursing level in Bucks in the last 3 years. Wow. So there are more matrons from a black and brown community. Obviously, I've got colleagues that we've brought in as well. So all we've got to do is keep striving to reduce what is unfairness sometimes in the recruitment process. I have to say, I always talk about, I came in 2019 for my interview to Stoke Mandeville, and there was 4 people they shortlisted. 2 men, 2 women, 2 people from a black and brown community. Okay. And I remember being in that space the whole day. It was pretty exhausting. And I left that thinking, what a masterful recruitment. I felt like I was treated fairly, and I was seen and heard. And I left there thinking, drove back home, thought, whatever happens, that was a really good experience. So if I hadn't got the job, I still was left feeling like that. And that's what we need to leave people feeling. It was lovely when I drove back to the pub. They were open back then. 2019, I got to the pub, my friend, the phone rang, and Neil offered me the job.
Wow.
Of course, he didn't tell me COVID was going to happen. I was going to start 2 weeks after lockdown. Do you know what I mean? That was not in my job description. However, that being said, we are doing our best, like many organisations, to hold up leaders in the organisation that look like people like us, to show you that it can be possible, and therefore we've got a load of, I won't go into detail, I'm sure Bridget will touch later on what the organisation's doing to improve and be more inclusive and be fair. And I think kindness and compassion, for me, is at the core of what I do as a chief nurse.
I know how powerful a champion you are for the ethnic minority. To even Kalinga organization, you were there for us since day 1. And that we can always count on you. What kind of pressure does that put on you?
Is there any more questions, by the way? How many more? That is such a great question. Every time you ask me, I think it's great, and he comes with another one. Oh my gosh. So, I am a real champion of the global majority, not the ethnic minority, I'm just going to say, because it's really important that we do start to change our language. Do you know, I talk about this as well, and I'm not really open to say we carry more because of that. And I remember when I started in the job, not only did I have COVID, and it was a new chief nurse job, first exec job, I learned on all these people like Kozia and others, because actually they've been doing the job for a while. We met like every week, I think, like literally every week online. So you need to have people that help prop you up. So that's why for me, I would not have taken this job if I did not have, 1, my allies, and to my networks. Because they're the things that help me. Because I always say, and I've said this to Neil as well, that when you come from our communities, you carry almost the weight of your community on your shoulders. Because they're looking to you. There are so few that look like you. So it is much harder, and I'll be very honest, it's much more emotionally taxing on people like us, because we do carry that. It's a huge responsibility. These jobs are huge anyway, and on top of it, you feel the weight, the responsibility. COVID was challenging because people looked like us were dying at a greater rate than others. That put a lot of strain and stress on us. So I think, you know, it is our additional workload to carry, but we all hold each other up in order to do that and move forward. So again, going back to well-being, looking after yourself, surrounding yourself with the right people is really important. And actually, if all I can do is champion and support others, and that's, I always say when I have etched on my gravestone, I'm going to be cremated, by the way, I'm not going to be, but when I have my little plaque, if it says that I was kind and I was a great nurse and I was inclusive and people will remember me for that, then I'm really, really happy.
And a lot of us are curious. You will be at the coronation of King Charles. What would you say to him on behalf of the minority?
I think May might be there. I think May and Nicosia might be there as well, but probably before me at this rate. So interestingly enough, can I just tell you just a fun fact, people? There's a black newspaper called The Voice. I don't know if any of you know it. Nicosia might know it. It's called The Voice. It's been around for quite a number of decades. King Charles, who was then Prince Charles, edited a whole edition of that, which was published just before his mother's death. So, I mean, there's a lot of work to do. We won't go into the ins and outs of what's going on within that. I think for all of us, it's that acceptance and understanding of actually this is a very diverse community of people, and actually to be proud that in the fabric of Great Britain is all of our DNA. You know, lot of what we've done in the UK is built off the back of many people that look like us, and I think for me it's that celebration and recognition of that. That's what I would say.
What would be the best advice you would give to us?
I think I've said a few things. I think firstly, your well-being. You know, we're all kind of, we almost think so selflessly we forget ourselves. So and I think what COVID has exposed is that. Think about yourself as much as you think about others. Keep doing these amazing things and propping up. I mean, I came in today and I was looked after. I mean, you guys are awesome. I mean, gosh. So look after each other. Stay together. Don't allow some of the things to fragment you as a community. That can happen. And I think for me, it's the things I've already said. Surround yourself with the good people. Stick to your values and know your worth. And that would be my advice.
My last two questions. Yes, please.
Question to George.
Hi, good morning. My name is Andy. I'm currently working in St. Patrick Ward, Spinal, but redeployed in A&E for 6 weeks. I just started. So, this is actually new to me. One of my fears before coming here to the UK is racism. Okay, and luckily I haven't experienced that, and I'm not looking forward to it. But just in case it happens, what would be my first approach? Thank you.
That's a very nice question. It is a very nice.
So firstly, can I thank you? Because you've gone to ED, we did ask colleagues to help support. We know that there's lots of pressures, and so can I thank you for putting yourself forward and helping to support that team. So thank you. Just give a round of applause. So it's a tricky one because racism is always obvious. And therefore, sometimes it's the little things. And what I would say to you is what you feel is important. Don't let anybody invalidate how you feel. Talk to your colleagues, talk to your friends. They will hold you up and they will support you. And I think if you can stick with that, that's the thing I would say. You're going to have to navigate it. That's the only way I've got through my career and my life, is to navigate it, and actually it will exist, you will experience it, and know your worth. And also, if you are experiencing it in the workplace, seek out support and help, because actually we should be supporting you. Racism is just as bad as violence and aggression from a patient who abuses you physically, and those two things sometimes are not treated in the same way. And remember that I was having this conversation yesterday when I got a call about a patient that was actually being quite racially abusive to a number of colleagues, and some of you may be in the room that have experienced that last few weeks. And one of the things I said to this a colleague was that whilst they're experiencing it in that workplace, we experience it every day outside of our workplace, and therefore actually that isn't just the one insult, it's all of the insults that you get. So seek help, it is out there, being into each other, and actually do not invalidate how you feel, because firstly, if you can recognise how you feel and know that it's real, then actually it will help you, because sometimes we internalise it, we go, it's not real, it's just me, I'm just feeling like this, it's not, and that doesn't help your mental health, and it doesn't help your physical health, and it doesn't help you, because you should trust yourself to know that. So I can't say any more than that, and it's, there's no golden rule to navigating it, but just lean into the people that matter, and then we'll support you, is what I would say.
You were recognized as a birthday hero during its 20th anniversary celebration. What does this mean for you?
So can I just say, firstly, I had no idea. So the Birthday Association contacted me, and they were like, oh, can you come to me? I was like, yeah, because I get invited to things. And I was off that week, and I took Mitchell with me. So I always try and drag these lot along. They're always a bit sick of me. I'm like, come with me, I'm going here, come here. So anyway, so they were messaging me, and then they said, can you send me a photo? And I was like, yeah, send me a photo, because that's not my resolution. I was like, okay. So I did not know. So I rocked up, it was this garden party in the back of Chelsea, and they were like, oh, Karen, and I was like, this is a bit weird. Oh, well, you're here, and I was like, okay. And I didn't realise, and when I went into one of the marquees, there was this massive one of those of me. Mitchell's got it in the back of his car. I was like, my God, what's that? And then literally, until they called my name, I had no idea. And what happened was, so I work for Helpforce, for those who don't look out there, championing volunteering, and we're quite closely working with government about embedding volunteering in the fabric of the DNA of the NHS and funding it. And my chair there, he put me forward for this thing. So anyway, I was there, and everyone was giving out awards, we were clapping like that, and then he called my name, and I was like, and literally, and then my first immediate thought was, why me? Because actually, I've not done all the work. You know what I mean? There's some amazing people in the charity I work that have done some amazing things. So I felt quite like, in fact, I think, Jen, were you there? I can't remember if you were there. Or a couple of colleagues were there, and they said to me, I was so funny, I nearly never went up, because I was like, did they just call my name? So what it means to me is what it means to all of you. And that is if it inspires you, because when I stand up and take those things, it isn't just for me, it's for every single one of you and the people in the organisation. So it matters to me if it matters to you.
Hi, my name is Lisa, working theatre recovery. My question will be a different side of flip of the coin. How would you balance to portray as a chief nurse as a whole that it is not viewed as leaning to only the global majority and might be seen as not inclusive in the organization?
You lot have all warmed up, haven't you? Could you ask these guys some of those questions? Right, I know they didn't get that many up. They warmed you up. And by the way, I complimented you on your dress, and the first thing you said was, tell me how, why, and I told you, just say thank you, because you look beautiful. And we always make excuses why we don't, when people give us a compliment. So thank you for that question. That's a really interesting question. So about a few months into my job, I heard, because what's interesting is, and a cozier and stuff will know, you hear stuff about yourself. Somebody tells you, I hear stuff about myself, rumours. Rumours can be really good in some ways. So anyway, I heard that I only got the job because I was black. So I remember I was in a board, we months later, I hadn't met none of the board because we weren't face to face, and we were in this board meeting, and we actually had the Race and Health Observatory, the race team come and speak to us about our data. And we were having a conversation, and I told the board, I said, oh, I heard a rumour about myself that I only got the job because I'm black. And they were all horrified, and Neil and I had a conversation about it, and I said, I laughed when I heard that because I expected to hear that. Because you fight, we work hard, we get to these jobs, and the question is, are you there because you're a token? And that comes up a lot. And I say to people, it's not about tokenism, it's about representation. And I think it's really important for us. So I've also been accused in previous jobs of only championing people that look like me. And I say to people all the time that actually that is just part of the burden that we carry, that people make those assumptions. Now, when I interviewed Jose and Mitchell and others, I always said to them, when I rang up Mitchell and offered him the job, I said, remember this, I gave you the job because you deserved it. You worked for it. You were the best person in that interview. I made the process fair to eliminate any bias. And I said to the recruitment agency, go out and find me people and organisations that are overlooked, because I've been overlooked. So you will always carry a bit of those rumours and burden. That will never stop me from doing the right thing by everybody in the organisation, no matter what they look like, no matter what they are, who they are. It's just really important to remember that you stick to your values, do the right thing, look after your people. Because actually, when people sometimes ask me, say, I got asked to do a talk the other day about looking after diverse staff, and I went online to do the talk. I said I was going to have just one side. I said, but my talk would have been over in 5 minutes. They were like, oh, what's that? Kind of hear the silence on the thing. And I said, just treat people fairly. That would be it. Because actually, if we all did that, then we would all see ourselves progressing regardless. So I hope that answers your question. It's a burden I will carry, and I will carry it with pride, because actually, if it means that actually I'm seen as being fair to everybody, then that's something that I will carry.
After listening to that experience, Karen, I think I am but compelled to bring out my magical mirror. Yeah. What would you say to your 10-year-old self?
Oh my gosh. Have you got it all? Check it. Oh gosh, what? So what I'd say to my 10-year-old self is be proud of who you are. Always remember that you are good enough, because I've had points in my life where I haven't always thought that was good enough. So my 10-year-old self, I would definitely say, remember, you are good enough. You are good enough. And I think that's the thing I would definitely say, because there's been moments in my life where I've not always felt like that.
Karen, let's do fast talk. To your mind.
I said to them, don't tell me what you're going to ask me, just ask me. I'm slightly irritated. Go ahead.
How about you?
Hot.
Bag or shoes?
Shoes.
The Caribbean or the United Kingdom?
It's hot there.
Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
The boat is sinking, you're only to save one person. Is it Mitchell or Giselle? Before Christmas, complete this line. All I want for Christmas is
Happiness.
Karen, forgive me for asking this. Is it sex or chocolates?
Can I just, oh my God, I was not expecting any of that. Can I just say, aren't these people, these students are so awesome, all of you. Honestly, I'm so proud to be here and so inspired. You're going to give me chocolates now?
Thank you, sir. Jenny.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to introduce this lovely guest speaker. She qualified in 1994 as a nurse in the Philippines and worked in the local government for 5 years. She was the first Filipino nurses who came in UK. She started in hematology at Birmingham Heartland Hospital, now called Heart of England. And now she works in the NHS for the last 23 years. With oncology research, practice development, and service management and operation. She set up an IV access team and service as a lead nurse for vascular access over the decade, and was awarded IV Therapy Nurse of the Year 2016 by the British Journal Nursing of Studies. She pursued her passion in healthcare and leadership as a Master of Science in 2016. As a BAMI, Black, Asian, Minority, and Ethnic Network Engagement Lead, she believes in equality and the strength of diversity so that the team can deliver the best care to our patient. In 2018, she initiated Project KINS, which means King's International Nurses. How are we doing? Which focuses on supporting the care and well-being of the newly arrived overseas nurses. This work leads her to a secondment post into a national role within the NHS England as the first Filipino Chief Nursing Officer of the BAMI Nurse Advisor for COVID-19 in 2020. Her work theme relates to addressing the disproportionate impact in the pandemic has had in our ethnic minority workforce and improving their pastoral care and support. Her substantive posts of the NHS England as International Recruitment and Ethnic Minority Nurse Advisor supports program to work related to overcome an experience of international recruited and ethnic minority nursing and midwifery workforce. This includes scoping, formulation, and strengthening of the work of the network, the International Nursing and Midwifery Association. across England, enhancing their collective voice and influence to impact positive change on the system. She's currently has attachment with Florence Nightingale Foundation as a head of global to work their global agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, can we give her a warm welcome? It's Jennifer Kadiwa, International
Thank you so much. That was a long introduction. I didn't expect you would be reading the whole thing. But it is such a pleasure to be here. I am so pleased to see you all. And Karen and Akosha, it means a lot in terms of that support. And I can really say May would have inspired you, but I hope you will take away a few things from what I have been asked to do. So Ranan asked me to do progression or regression, the plight of our internationally recruited Filipino nurses in the NHS. And I always start my slide and my talk with saying, are we learning from history? Because, as Karen did say, since the inception of the NHS has been reliant on international recruitment. They came from the Caribbeans, the Windrush generation, and that's in 1948. And when I was searching through Twitter, it's amazing what you find. I didn't realize that Filipino nurses already arrived in the 70s. And I got that, 1974. I was 1 year old then. Next slide, please. But if you look at UK policy and the impact, these are the only two graphs that I will have in my talk anyway. But the first graph shows the history in terms of the budget of the UK in terms of health. And you see it increasing every decade. But this is really interesting, and I hope you will share my slides for all the participants. But the effect of the UK policy on recruitment. And you see a trend, and I see this as a trend. Every 25 years or so 1950s, Caribbean, 1970s, Filipinos, Mauritians, people from the other African countries came in the 1970s. You see that peak. And then I came in 1999, and you see that peak where we didn't have to do OSCEs, but we did an adaptation period, and then they introduced English, and it went down. And then after 25 years again, 2022 now, I came in 1999, 20 years or so. That ends in 2020. We have another peak. And you, I think most of you are coming from this generation. I'm so old. But this is the photo when we first arrived at Birmingham Heartlands Hospital. And actually, at that time, we were the first Filipinos who would have got into Heartlands. And I had a matron who was a Caribbean nurse as well, and she supported me in terms of that journey when I first arrived, because she knew how important it was that I had to feel at home. Next slide, please. So part of my portfolio, as I was asking, was I was told to scope engage with the different ethnic minority communities. And Duncan, our international recruitment director at NHS England, asked me, can you do a roundtable, Jenny, just out of the blue, just to find out what lessons can we learn from international recruitment, from the Windrush generation, and what are we learning now? And as you can see, the same themes. Starts with accommodation. And that's the reason I was fighting for the international nurses in King's at that time, because I'm a lead vascular access nurse. I go around the hospital, I see them crying in the corridor because in London, you have to have 1 month advance, 1 month deposit. And they have nowhere to live, and they only were given 1 month accommodation. They have to pass their OSCEs. The managers are putting them on a night shift before their exams. They go to Ireland, they pay for their own travel to get there. These are unacceptable because I'm thinking, I didn't have that experience. I was cared for 20 years ago, and how come this is happening? And it was hard because, of course, this is not your area. You should be in HR if you're looking after this, but this is really something that is close to my heart because I've been there. Next, how is our experience recognized? A lot of people, even the Caribbean nurses, some of them would have masters, they have already their degrees, they came over in the 70s, they still had to do their nurse training. And they had to repeat that. The biggest thing is in terms of the failure rates. And again, in the Windrush generation, the question is, how many have progressed in that 70 years that they've been here? As Karen said, very few still. And that's 70 years of history. We would only be like 50 or 25 because the majority of Filipinos would have come around that year 2000. And then the highest thing is in terms of race equality. If you look at this table, how are our migrant nurses and the workforce, the doctors who come over, socialized into UK society? And that is the learning curve because, again, there are so many struggles if you are a first-generation immigrant. First, Karen said about the need to belong. You don't feel you belong anywhere, and you really have to find hard because it's like, this is their culture now, but I came from another culture. The second one, we always have that family value, and we have to send money back home. And balance that out with how much is the cost of living here. And you have to find that resilience, but you have that inner struggle that, how will you feel guilty that you are living a better life here, and that somewhere in the Philippines, someone is still having a hard life there. No matter how successful you are, you're always thinking, you're always going back to where you come from. And that's my challenge to you. How do you overcome that? Because at the end of the day, we always want to have a sense of purpose and vision wherever we are. Next slide, please. So, this is now, I think, what makes me hopeful. Because we have, when I started in 2020, I only had the 4. Nigerians, Philippines, Indian, and Nigeria, Philippines, and Jamaicans as very organized communities that have associations. And you are a sub from the PNA and FNA, but I really admire your strength of community here. It's really good. I didn't expect this number, but well done. But these are now trying to organize, and I think what my role, and it makes it so purposeful, is how do we harness that collective voice from them? Because every leader that I would be talking to has the same issues as we have as a community. And for them to be able to listen to us, for those who have influence at NHS England or at the local level, your senior managers, how do we make that happen? Next slide, please. This is a graph from Prof. Anton, because I said, Prof, can you give me some tips on how I could portray that? And this is the rest indicators from this year. Indicator 8 is the percentage of staff believing that the organization provides equal opportunities for career progression or promotion. And remember, we didn't have Filipino as part of our ESR before. So, either we belong to other or Asian. So that's the red and orange, okay? And you will see it's still low. Compare it to the blue and light blue, that's the white. Just to interpret it. This side is interesting because in the last 12 months, have you personally experienced discrimination at work? And this shows that evidence of where we are in terms of that experience. The red and the orange, okay? Next slide, please. And so, I did say this, every leader that I spoke with, no matter what kind of ethnic minority they come from, how do we get recognized? How do we have a standardized pay based on our experience? Because some people come from the Middle East, they would have been there 10, 15 years, but you still have to start at the very bottom. A slow or lack of career progression. That representation. And I won't go into the detail of racism, we've talked about that earlier, but I want to go through some of the key things that I've learned by talking to our community. Next slide, please. So what I want to give to you now is that insight. Let's look at ourselves. Next slide, please. So remember, we were already here 1970s. And when I talk about these nurses who arrived in that era, I wouldn't see someone who have gone beyond probably a ward manager level. And that is what Karen was referring to. We didn't see anyone who looked like us when we arrived in year 2000. And it's only now that you would see the likes of Mitchell, the likes of Jose, maybe like me, who are in this post. And then I'd like to think that it makes you think as well now how can I get to that point? Next slide, please. Because in those times, people were already recognizing how brilliant we are. This is Gloria Sevilla getting an award for Nurse of the Year. And look at these numbers. This is from RADA now, Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. 41,000, 20,000, and 48. What do the numbers mean? Any guesses? Salary, bonus, and hours worked per week. That's a good one. Next slide. And that's the challenge because part of it is, Prof. Anton says, our community has historically been severely underrepresented. And if you talk about race disparity, that's the ratio of how many are there at very senior posts compared to the number of people who are in that workforce. The national picture is 2.7. Filipino, 28. The higher that number is, the bigger that disparity. That's according to Prof. And out of the 36 Filipino nurses that I arrived with in 1999, I still go back because I have very long-term friends there. Most of them are still at Band 5. 23 years after. Is that where we want to be? And I challenge them. And they would say, it's not wanting to progress, Jenny, but We've tried to apply 2, 3 times, and still they won't give the post to us.
Yes.
Then move. Duncan, I was telling him this story, and then he said, so why are they not moving? Because we have a Japanese mentality. We are so loyal to the organization.
Yes.
We are so loyal to the NHS that we will stay where we are planted. We buy our property near the hospital, and then we live there forever. Is that how it should be? And this graph, this photo is really interesting because look, it says that's where we are, and there's someone who probably is right, but that's how they see. Look how far behind they are. They must not be working hard. Honestly?
Yeah.
Is that how we are? And I'll show you the next slide, please. So, it's not about pay. Those numbers are, according to the NMC Register 2022, 41,090 Filipino nursing and midwifery registered nurses. More than half are working in the NHS. Francis, Fernando, and I, during COVID, started to scope how many Filipino nurses have reached 8B and above. 48 out of 20,000. And this is my challenge to you. What happened here? Michelle! It's good Michelle is here because some of this are, I will have to give him credit for it. But this is the reality of Filipino nurses working here in the UK. Next slide, please. And let's look at our culture. I put there, we are stereotyped as caring, competent, quiet, always saying yes. And how do we say no? Even your ward manager asks you, and you've been the whole week in COVID, Jenny, go to the COVID ward.
Yes.
Okay. And this is true. Our self-belief, how much do we get that confidence to say no, to articulate our arguments, to be able to say, this is not right? How do we speak up? Because it's so important. We have to learn more of these verbs here. Because as you arrive in this country, it's understandable. You are shy, you're unassuming, you don't want to rock the boat because you're on a visa. But we have very good ideas. How do you put that forward? How do you overcome that speaking up? And hardworking. The 48 hours, I'm sure there are more hours that you work. And that's the reason why I think we had a higher mortality during the first wave of the pandemic.
Yes.
Because overtime, bank, agency, yeah, I can do this. Oh, it's just, another shift. And when I look at the data, how many of these are middle-aged, who have comorbidities, who are diabetics, that is the reason. Next slide, please. And so, what have we learned? We did this in 2021, just very quickly. Just press every button down, so I didn't realize it was there. As I've said, when we are on a 3-year contract, you lose your voice, but that shouldn't stop you. Remember, we were lost in that aggregated data and we belonged in others. But Prof. Anton, bless his soul, in January this year said, "You will be so happy, Jenny, give me a call." And then he said, finally, Filipino is part of ESR, and Mitchell has been doing that in the trust. And we need more leaders in different trusts pushing for this because we were lost in that aggregated data. If they knew there were more Filipinos who were dying, and that's the reason why with Francis he escalated this to Ruth May, and then her team then said, so we need a perspective from a Filipino nurse. And that's the only reason I got this job, because of course they wanted a nurse advisor from a Filipino background. I got this job because of COVID. And if COVID did not happen, I would still be at King's. But this is so important. The need for more Filipinos to be at senior level, because we need to have a voice. That is now in the NNC register, we are the biggest number. But we still have a long way to go in terms of the confidence to be able to say, we are here. We have to know our worth, as Karen says. We have to feel more entitled to what we have earned on this country. Next slide, please. And when we look at ourselves, this 8B and above people, the 48, this is what we found. Again, we see the external barriers. Our managers would say, I want to go for a master's. No, it's not time yet. No budget. But the striking thing here is someone would say to them, you don't belong here. And what message is that saying to you? And I hope that that doesn't knock your confidence, because we also have our own personal barriers that we need to overcome. And a lot of us will now need to catch up, because if you are not putting yourself forward, I'm sure the millennials are more ambitious here. They will overtake you and you would say, how come they got the job and I've been here 20 years? So, we know these are the things, based on our experience as senior nurses. We need champions. We need to be more proactive about our own development. We need coaching. We need to find a coach, a mentor who will keep pushing you. Next slide. Next slide, please. And just to reassure you, in terms of the academic barriers, I've escalated this to Mark Radford, because did you know some of us are still being made to undergo our nurse training, a BSN degree in the UK before you can go on a master's? Yes, there are universities like that. There are line managers who won't sign you off for going for further studies, and you need to be able to address that in your own way. How do you influence? And that recognition of prior experience is being looked at. We have projects to make sure that that happens now at NHS England. It will not affect you, but the ones who are in the future coming, but it shows that we are learning from history. Next slide, please. And this is Michelle, who will always say we have to have targets. But out of those 5 that you can see, I think I'd like to say the profile of Filipino senior nurses is more out there now. That's a plus, but we need more. There's no one until this year who has been accepted on the NIBEVAN program. That's an executive program on the Leadership Academy. We've been here 20 years, but no one has accessed that. So Francis was successful. Did you apply, Michelle? Did you apply? Yes, so he's doing both. That is so good. So we have 2 Filipinos. Give me applying for the NIBEVAN. And that is like the ultimate in terms of that training to get to board level. And then, as I've said about more needs to be done in terms of declaring ourselves when we are applying. Say, for example, just put yourself as Filipino. Every form, every data counts. And that way, it will show that granularity in terms of that experience of the NHS staff survey, on ESR, in NMC. We need to make sure we are being captured appropriately. And we are working on that, as I've said, in NHS England. Next slide, please. And these are some of the photos where, for the first time in 2021, this was a breakthrough that we had the UK government, the Philippine Embassy, FNA, PNA, all coming together, and Florence Nightingale Foundation was there. And they've made that commitment in terms of that development for our ethnic minority, particularly when they heard about how big our community has been. Because I've never heard of FNF until I got to NHS England. That is how the opportunities don't just reach us. But I would encourage you, explore further opportunities from other charities, because they are now really waking up to the fact that they need to provide more. And guess what? This was the other day, 1,000 international nurses on leadership development at Florence Nightingale Foundation. I was so worried. When I got in September, they told me we need to recruit 1,000 nurses on this course. And then the Queen died and we could not advertise. But guess how many applied? 2,300. And it broke my heart that 1,300 had to be taken out, but there's another one for the next year. But it shows the need for development for internationally recruited nurses. Next slide, please. I'm mindful of time. This is a testament in terms of the support that we have. Ruth has recognized the Filipino Senior Nurses Alliance. I'm constantly inviting our senior leaders in nursing to engage with us to make sure they know what needs to happen to make sure our community also progresses. And that is, I think, so important that we need to have, I keep repeating this, the Filipino captured on ESR, and more leadership academy opportunities are being accessed by our community. I am a product of, I wouldn't get my master's if not for the Leadership Academy. They are free, but it needs the support of your manager. Next slide, please. So my challenge to you, I've coined the term internationally educated nurses, but I have 3 action verbs that I'd like to leave with you. Edmund, our very first chief nurse. And I know how busy he is, but he made an effort to come and see us. But those are some of the Filipino senior nurses that you've got across the nation. But I challenge you to 3 action verbs. Influence. You know, the work of leadership is influence. No matter what level you are, even at clinical level, you influence the doctor because you know what's best for the patient. We have to make sure we keep doing that. It's not that we've got here, that's enough. Engage. There's research now to say the power of communities, what you've got here, is so good because the support system, the way you can connect with people, this is so important because we learn from each other. The more connected we are, the stronger we would be. And this is the hardest part, and I still have to learn this skill. Negotiate. My friend, Dr. Peggy Warren, coined the term for immigrants. We are really good, grateful recipients. We're always grateful for the opportunity. We are already here. We've made it. We have come and we've left the Philippines and we are earning pounds. Is that enough? Because being grateful recipients make you complacent. I'm happy where I am. I'll just be a band 5 forever. I don't want the responsibility. But my challenge to you, how are you negotiating the conditions that you are in? You're the band 5, but you're always in charge. You're doing the job yourself. So why don't you get paid for it? What's stopping you? I'll leave you with those 3 words. Influence, engage, and negotiate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Sorry, is there any question from the audience for Jenny? Anyone? Just to make you aware, Jenny, when I did what I said during my opening remarks is one of the reasons this conference was done is because when I attended the conference, which was organized by the PNA, I saw you and this is what you presented. And I think I'm going to give them this favor if I'm not going to ask them here. Everybody should have listened. I think the rest of the Filipinos should know the data that she presented, and I hope you're going to present it to more Filipinos across the UK. Thank you very much. Hello. So the lunch is going to be served at 12 noon. This is an opportunity for you to meet our distinguished guests, have a chat with them, have a chat with other networks. So lunch is going to be served at 12 o'clock.